Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back. Thank you for joining us. Dear speakers, dear guests, 40 years of Cullen International runs parallel with 40 years of EU telecoms regulation. And for half of that period, I've had the privilege of following these debates at Cullen. I joined in 2007 during what was then the EU Telecoms Framework Review. And it strikes me that although many things have changed in terms of technology, the challenges that policymakers, regulators, and stakeholders must address remain the same. How to give space to market players to carry out their business and to innovate, while at the same time ensuring competition and the right of end users. In many respects, the story of European telecoms regulation has been one of finding the right balance between these objectives. Europe set in motion the liberalization of satellite broadcasting in the mid-1980s and issued the GSM directive around the same time. And in some respects, it now seems that we have gone full circle because today both satellite services and mobile services are again at the center of the debate. This time in the context of the Digital Networks Act, the DNA. The DNA aims to create the right conditions for the networks of the next decade, addressing fiber, 5G, 6G, and satellite. But it also considers the broader ecosystem, such as data centers and cloud. And this reflects on the importance of digital connectivity as part of the European Union's overall priorities. Once the domain of technical specialists, digital connectivity has become of the utmost strategic importance. Connectivity was already an integral part of the twin transition for digital and climate under the previous Commission, and the current Commission has added tech sovereignty, so the ability of Europe to set its own course, dependent on non-European countries, on non-EU technologies, or on non-EU resources. Recent geopolitical developments have only reinforced the importance of resilient and secure digital infrastructure for Europe. On top of that, the DNA must also contribute to Europe's competitiveness and cut back on red tape, making it easier to do business. Whether the DNA can meet these high expectations is part of the discussion that has now started in earnest. So we are fortunate to have a distinguished panel of speakers from the European Parliament, from regulators, and from industry. What has become clear, though, is that the DNA is not a quick fix for Europe's connectivity ambitions. The objective is to have gigabit connectivity for all households and for all businesses by 2030, and to have 5G or 5G equivalent coverage for all populated areas. Parliament and Council aim for an agreement by the end of 2027, which seems doable but ambitious nevertheless. The DNA would then apply within 6 months after it entered into force, or even 12 months in some cases. And some member states are already asking for even longer periods to adjust their national laws. As so often in Europe, agreeing on the rules is only the beginning. Implementing them successfully across 27 member states is an equally important challenge. But until we get there, we have much debate ahead. Just to highlight 3 remarkable elements from the DNA. 1, it foresees the mandatory switch off of copper networks, subject to safeguards, of course. Transitions to fiber by 2039 at the very, very latest. 2, the DNA makes a bold step by setting up a harmonized and centralized framework at EU level for the authorization of satellite networks and communication services and the use of satellite spectrum. The growing strategic importance of satellite connectivity, both as a complement to terrestrial networks and as a tool for resilience and competitiveness. 3, the voluntary conciliation mechanism seeks to address disputes between telecoms operators and large content providers, addressing the issues raised during the network contribution or fair share debate, for example, on IP interconnection. And this would be part of a broader cooperation among the various parts of the internet ecosystem on subjects ranging from energy efficiency to innovative services. Whether these proposals strike the right balance is one of the questions that policymakers, regulators, and industry will be discussing. And as these discussions evolve, Cullen International will be by your side. On our website, you can find the DNA Hub, where we bring together our analysis and event reports. And we hope it will serve as a useful resource as the work on the DNA progresses. As we celebrate Cullen International's 40th anniversary, we look forward to supporting informed debates for many years to come. With that, let me hand over to Matej, who will guide today's discussion. Matej, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Martin. First, some physical work in this heat is always nice. Thank you, Martin, for your introduction. And before we begin, let me briefly introduce our panel. We are joined by Michał Kobosko, member of the European Parliament for Renew Europe and Parliament's Rapporteur on the Digital Networks Act. Then we have Alejandra de Iturriaga Gandini, chair of the Spanish regulators, CNMC, and incoming chair of BEREC for next year. Then we have Stephen Tess, head of regulatory at Proximus, but speaking today also in his capacity as executive board chair of Connect Europe, the association of the biggest telcos in Europe, mostly ex-incumbents. Then we have Francesco Nonno, head of regulatory and European affairs at Open Fiber, and now not president, but vice president of FTTH Council Europe, the Association of Alternative Fiber Operators, and Federico Boccardi, head of connectivity policy for Europe at Amazon Web Services, who will also talk about a wider Amazon perspective today. So thank you very much, all of you, for being here today. Martin, I think, has set the scene very well. The DNA is an ambitious proposal, but also a very complex one, and it addresses a lot of topics. But given the time constraints we are under and the international audience we have today, I will try not to turn this into an article-by-article discussion, but would like to frame the panel around three broader questions, which Martin already mentioned. So copper decommissioning, how can regulation accelerate the move from legacy, mostly copper networks, to future-proof connectivity? Second, can the DNA create a workable European framework for satellite connectivity, one that on one hand reduces national fragmentation and gives operators more predictability, while still ensuring effective spectrum management, interference control, security, and also a level playing field with terrestrial networks? And third, how should the DNA deal with cooperation across the wider digital ecosystem without simply reducing it to the good old fair share debate? So let me start with Mr. Kobosko. So as a rapporteur for the DNA, may I ask you to set the political frame for us and maybe touch upon the core problem that the DNA needs to solve? Is it the ostensible investment gap, market fragmentation, competitiveness, resilience, or do you see all this part of the same challenge?
Thanks so much for the question. Thanks for having me here. I would start with saying happy birthday to Cullen International. Look, 40 years ago in 1986, my country, Poland, was still a communist state where you had the state office for the telecommunication, and getting a fixed line was a luxury and costed a small fortune if you could afford it to have it. And it was still long 6 years ahead when we got the first mobile phones in the country. And nowadays, today, Poland is one of the most modern, competitive telco markets in Europe, with pretty attractive prices for the consumers, but also pretty friendly environment for the main players, for the players on the markets. This 40 years perspective is showing, the long way that we went through. And I was thinking, whether we might imagine what happens 40 years from now on. That would be tricky. And one more anecdote. 3 weeks ago, I was in Washington and Boston talking to different US experts on the AI development, and I asked about the long-term forecast for the AI development. And one of the professors at MIT said, long-term is 3 to 4 years from now. That's a long term today. And that makes things even more tricky when it comes to the DNA and all the pieces of legislation, of the digital legislation that we work on. You know perfectly well that the Commission presented DNA proposal back in January, and afterwards what we heard and what we are dealing with, basically not really positive feedback coming from very different sides. Simply the expectations were much higher, much more ambitious, and also expectations from us right now, from the Parliament, are pretty big. Commission went short of, I would say, of delivering what was proposed in the white paper in 2024. Also, the vision of, at that time, Commissioner Thierry Breton is not really materialized in the DNA proposal that we are having. So this is why this challenge is pretty huge. Also, when you look at the fragmented parliament and different strong sides of the political fights in the parliament itself, then the geopolitics and pretty tense relations with our US partners right now. So that that makes, kind of, answer to the directly political dimension that you wanted to ask. But talking about specifics of the DNA, I would say that, my main assumption is that we need to cover and we need to reach 3 goals. 3 goals related to the main pillars of our thinking about the future connectivity in Europe. And the first one, obviously, is the simplification. And I'm trying to answer you many times the question which shouldn't be asked to me personally, why we do not see a simplification in the DNA proposal. We see it, but not in a way that was expected, not to the extent that was expected. And I believe that that should be delivered in this proposal. But the simplification needs to be there because, at the end of the day, you could say that in the current form, the European Commission is the only side which is quite happy and satisfied with the proposal, with the DNA proposal, and it's not where we should be at this point. I also have to be, respectful and say that, I respect the fact that the Commission is pretty open to the criticism, and they are ready to adapt some amendments, fixing the DNA proposal, and we'll be working hard on that simplification factor is added to the proposal, as should be more of the harmonization of rules, not everywhere, not in every piece, but there are many places where we could have more harmonizing of the rules among the member states. So that's the second pillar. And the third, last but definitely not the least, is about the investments of the telco industry. We know it's missing. We know what the operators are telling us, and I'm sure you will hear it during this panel as well. We need to have our European players invest much more to adapt to the dramatically changing ecosystem of Europe. And whenever I hear that the DNA is about the telco industry and future of the telco industry, I immediately start quarreling, because this is about the digital ecosystem, the backbone of everything that's behind the connectivity or ahead of connectivity. When you talk about, the AI, the quantum, the cloud services for Europe, the digital platforms, you need to have a proper connectivity in Europe, and that's the issue ahead of us, that it's not been solved. So these 3 main pillars, I would say they constitute our thinking and our job at the Parliament. You saw the calendar. Yes, I believe that we will be able to deliver our opinion at the level of the ITRE committee before the end of the year. We aim for October. It's ambitious, but I believe that we need to do that. It's just that it's not about whether it's October or November. It's about doing this in a proper way, delivering what is expected and what is needed for our connectivity. So that's the point where we are right now, having really serious conversations like this one today about different pieces of this legislation, lots of controversial pieces, lots of discussions regarding the elements you already mentioned that will be discussed during the panel. But I remain optimistic that we will reach a final outcome which will be much more satisfying for our European connectivity than the current form of the DNA. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now for the regulator's perspective. Alejandra, in your opinion, what is the most important improvement needed in the DNA proposal from the perspective of regulatory workability and effective implementation once it's adopted?
Thank you. It's okay. Okay, thank you to Cullen. Happy birthday to Cullen. Thank you to Philippe and his staff. Thank you, Matej, for inviting me to this timely debate. It is an honor to be here with such an incredible members of the session, and it's a very timely moment to address the DNA, because the DNA has been published and it sets the rules to the coming reform of the electronic communication framework. Its objectives are very ambitious. We know it. They aim to update the rules to the evolution of the markets, the technical evolution, markets evolution, and also its objectives are aimed to achieve more competitiveness, more simplification, more resilience, security, and that's all the objectives that are very ambitious. So BEREC has actively contributed to this process, to the elaboration of this DNA, and will still maintain our contribution. Early in March, we published an assessment, and now in June, plenary in June, celebrated in Dublin, we were able to approve a lot of documents, thematic documents on the most important thematic issues and topics on the DNA. And all around these messages that are in these documents, one key idea is the important one, that competition still is the key driver for competitiveness and welfare for end users. And this is not that we don't want to change. Absolutely not. Regulators are here to evolve with the evolution of the technology and with the markets. We only say that EU framework has been working very well, has been successful in achieving the opening of the market and of the end users' choices. So that is a good point to start, but we want to achieve more changes that have been, some of them have addressed it, but some of them have to be taken into account with a more balanced approach. That is said that, for example, we have, as Mr. Kobosko has said, we have addressed the possibility of the single passport. We have addressed the single passport in a very important paper where we say we have to take in very careful the proposal of the DNA, and that is because it may add some kind of complexity on the procedure. Currently, there is the possibility to have one notification, but the single notification of all operators, which will be important for all the competitiveness, for the simplification of the market, cannot be at the expenses of the jurisdiction of the informers of NRAs. We as NRAs are the one who know exactly what measures have to be taken, what are the circumstances, natural circumstances of each market. So we have to have this flexibility that we already have in the past. We have demonstrated that we have deregulated the markets whenever there was competition. And we have to have this flexibility as well. So on the other hand, apart from simplification, that I completely agree what Mr. Kobosko was saying, we address in our paper that all the measures adopted to achieve the single market, to achieve the competitiveness, should not be should not mean deregulation, should mean to take into account the necessity of investment, innovation, but of course, maintaining the ex-ante regulation whenever it's needed, whenever there is a bottleneck.
Thank you very much. Now, if I turn to you, Stephen, from the perspective of Proximus and Connect Europe, what do you think is the key change needed to make DNA more credible as an investment and competitiveness instrument for European telcos?
Well, thank you, Matej, and hi to everybody here present. And thank you to my good friend Philip from Cullen for the invitation. And my sincere congratulations also from my side to you, Philip, and to the whole team of Cullen, in name of myself and Connect Europe. I know Philip for many years. I started working in the sector in '94. You refer to 96, so I know how the sector was in 94. So more than 30 years ago at Proximus, by far the best telecom operator in Belgium. So, but I will limit the free publicity to that. But of course, I'm stating the obvious. Often when I meet with Philip from Cullen, I joke that he's the only one who really benefited from the significant regulation in Europe. He has been able to build a very successful business on the complexity of regulation, and he's often of great help to us, because if only in my team is saying, could Cullen help us with this hyper-extreme complexity of the European regulation? Thank you for that, Philip, and again, congratulations. Now, on the flip side, I cannot say the same thing about the sector itself. Mr. Kobosko already referred to it. The telecom industry and the digital industry in the most broadest sense is not in such good shape in Europe. So let's call a cat a cat. I'm chairing the association for many years, for more than 10 years. Our members are the operators who are actually doing the investment in the infrastructure of Europe, more than 50 billions annually. And I can tell you it's a tough and difficult thing to do, because the market is burdened by heavy regulation and high level of complexity. We are celebrating an anniversary of 40 years, so allow me to go also a little bit back in time, as you did, Mr. Kobosko. And I was rereading an interesting document I think we should all read, is the Green Paper on the Liberalization of the Telecommunication Infrastructure in Europe. That's a paper of '94 from the Commission Santer, that started the liberalization of the digital markets in Europe. And that was a very visionary paper. So that was before we all had monopolies still in Europe. And that paper said, what we really need to do is I'm just quoting a few things. The information society is on its way. Yeah? So we're talking about 94. Telecom infrastructure will form the fundamental platform on which the European society and the economy will depend. 94. It will be the backbone of Europe's information society. Europe's firms must be able to compete effectively with their counterparts in other regions of the world. By reinforcing the competitiveness of European companies, we will be well placed to take advantage of new opportunities and win new markets. It's quite visionary. A set of rules was right after introduced to liberalize markets, and the idea was to roll these rules back and then to rely on ex-ante regulation. Now, let's be honest with ourselves. When you read that landmark paper from '94, you can only conclude that to a large extent we failed with that ambition of '94. I think it was explained at the right time, but I think we have not done enough in the past 3 decades to deal with it. When I started to be in charge of regulation almost 30 years, I could do it with a team of less than 10 people. Now I need more than 100 people, and I will even not be able to manage all the complexity of the European regulation. And don't understand me wrong, on your point on competition, I think also on our sector, we are really in favor of competition, but we are in favor of a competition that results in healthy and strong European companies. And I think our current rule book is not delivering that. So I think the start was good, but the execution was not so good over the past decades. We can discuss in the panel a bit what is the root causes of that. I think what we fundamentally underestimate is the dynamics of this market. You referred to that when you said the future is 3 years. We fundamentally underestimate that. We have these review cycles every 10 years, but the world is going so fast. And also, I think among our people, sometimes people are just a bit blind to what is really happening around us. And sometimes maybe I think policymakers lack a bit of courage to do reforms. They take it a bit on the safe side, but that's not the best recipe for success. But let's stay positive. We are in the review cycle. We have great leadership in the parliament to deal with the challenge. We have the presidency, as we have been talking to. The DNA is really needed. It's not a proposal which on the table is we need it, but I think we need to reform it. But of course, as I said to you during the lunch break, it would be boring if you can only say that it's perfect. So let's enjoy the fact that we have a lot of work on it. There is a lot of things which are in it are positive. I think the spectrum reforms are positive. I think it's less positive on the more investment supportive initiatives. And there are very strange things in it, like another new wholesale product that we invent on top of every complexity we already have in the market. We have rules on copper switch off, which is a kind of policy you would rather expect from the East European communist markets, where you have plan economy rather than free economy. So we need much more incentives, I think, to invest to invest in fiber. And simplification. I think that should really be our rule when we evaluate the whole package.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Now, Francesco, if we go to you from Open Fiber and FTTH Council perspective, what must the DNA get right to support investment in fiber, but not only the rollout and investment, but also take-up of fiber down the years?
Thank you, Matej. It's a pleasure to be here and have the opportunity to share views with such a distinguished panel. FTTH Council Europe is an organization of 170 members in Europe, comprising vendors, operators, software producers. So we are quite a composite association. And we have the objective of bringing fiber to everyone and everywhere in Europe. So our objective is clearly fiber coverage and take-up. If we look at the direction the DNA is pushing, we consider that this is going in the right direction. It is going in the right directions for a different set of reasons, and I go through all of them. But before entering the specific reasons for copper switch off, let's give a broader view to the industry. And we all say always that we need to evolve and introduce artificial intelligence everywhere in our industries, that we need more and more cloud to support application and also edge data centers to put the application closer to end users. We are going towards quantum technologies, but all this needs fiber. All this needs high-level connectivity. So when we talk about fiber, it's not just giving access to a home. This is part of the game, of course, but it's not just that. This is the infrastructure which serves a lot of different purposes in our countries. And I'll get to resilience as last point, but they also improve resiliency a lot. A second issue I would like to highlight is that copper switch off is not something new. It already happened in a lot of countries. Spain completed copper switch off. Norway completed copper switch off. Sweden almost completed. France is a very advanced stage. Romania also. So we are talking about something we know and did not produce any negative impact. If you look at presentations by Telefonica, they are very happy with what they achieved through copper switch off. In particular, they make reference to very huge operational efficiency, energy savings, and better quality of services to everyone. So it's always a win-win-win situation. And if we look at benefits of copper switch off, first of all, it's investment. No, we have the objective to achieve 100% coverage. We are not so far because we are in Europe more or less at 80%. But the last part we know it's typically the most difficult, the one where there is less return. Knowing that when you invest, you will have your network used by end user by a certain date, clearly makes the investment case much better and is able to mobilitate private resources instead of the public resources which would be needed to complete coverage if we want to achieve that level of coverage. So in that sense, copper switch off, it's really an element of support to investment. It's more or less, in my view, the same they are doing with spectrum duration of licenses, where the fact of increasing the time of duration of licenses is increasing the willingness to invest in spectrum. I just point to 3 points more. One is competition. In our association, there are dozens of operators who have invested in fiber which are not ex-incumbents. The company I work for, Open Fiber, is the largest fiber provider in Italy. So we are talking about a lot of investment made by private investors. A lot of international funds are investing in this area because the conditions were excellent. Now they are slowing down because the conditions are not the same as they were before. So if we want to have these people continue investing money in Europe, we need to give them incentives, adequate incentives to continue to invest. And if we look at competition, of course, the fiber world is much more competitive than the copper world. Copper was a monopoly for historical reasons in each of our countries. Fiber has more than one player in each country. In some cases, dozens of players, in some cases 2, 3, 4, but anyway, it's competitively very positive. And I get to the last points, which in my view are among the most important. The first one is overall efficiency. There is operational efficiency in switching off copper networks because you reduce costs, but you reduce costs by huge percentages. Because when you run multiple networks, you have to maintain all of them operational, and therefore you multiply by 2, 3, 4. If you maintain ADSL, VDSL, and FTTH, you have at the end 3 types of networks you have to maintain operational. When you switch them off, you reduce costs by 50, 60%. It's a lot. But the energy savings are much more astonishing because in terms of energy, fiber works with much less energy than copper. So when you switch off all the copper technologies, you reduce energy consumption in access networks by between 80 and 90%. Telefonica achievement was 85%, measured, not theoretical. Yeah. And this has a very relevant impact on resiliency because you need much more energy to have the network operational. In Ukraine, they accelerated copper switch off because this led them to the possibility of powering the switches with generators and other LM battery, etc., for 72 hours if energy was cut off. So the the fact of relying on just fiber has increased the overall resiliency of the Ukrainian telecom network by a lot. And this has had an overall impact on their strategic response to attacks, which can be easily understood. So if we look at the future, this is clearly a direction where there are no good reasons not to go in that directions. Then I listed about legal opinions, etc. But this is the clear reaction that someone who has something to lose, and of course, in the general interest, there are single subjects we can lose something, and try to oppose this change. But this is a natural change. We think we shall accelerate it. And in particular, there is one point which is the most important. The fact that we begin a copper switch off wherever a fiber network exists. Because this is the most important message we are giving to investors. If you invest, you'll get your network used. This is the direction we have to go. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will come back. I see, Stephen, your eyes shining. We will come back to copper switch off in a minute, so you will have a chance to talk more about it. Now to you, Federico, from Amazon's perspective, what are the main risks you see in the DNA proposal for innovation, cloud, satellite, but also broader digital ecosystem where Amazon is involved in different layers?
Thank you, Matej, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. And so today I'm representing the different Amazon businesses that are in scope in different ways of DNA. There is Amazon Web Services for cloud, there is Amazon Leo for low orbit satellites, and there is Amazon Prime Video for content. Just to give you a number about Amazon commitment to Europe, in 2025 alone, Amazon invested 60 billion euros in Europe. And that includes investments in data centers, investments in AI infrastructure, investments in cloud services, CDN services, investments in subsea cables, network infrastructure, connectivity infrastructure for hard-to-reach area through Leo, and investments in content through Amazon Prime Video. So to your question now, Matej, we believe there are 3 areas for improvement in the DNA, and all of them are related to simplification, actually. So the first one, we welcome the focus on resilience and security. However, there are duplications, and there are duplications with the NIS2, for example. Our infrastructure, our backbone networks are already in scope of NIS2. And we believe actually that the ongoing revision of the Cybersecurity Act provides a good opportunity to assess those and possibly and new regulatory concerns under the Cybersecurity Act revision. It's an important opportunity because A, it's about simplification, but 2, it provides a clear and more bounded scope. And I'm going to move to our second concern, which is about scope. Because the extension of general authorization regime to networks that are used only or mainly to provide information society services to the public in Article 9.2 has a very broad scope. And it is not supported by any identification of a problem, it's not supported by any impact assessment. Our own assessment is that it could subject thousands of organizations that have nothing to do with telecoms to telecom regulation. And I'll come back on this point. Third, on satellites, Amazon Leo has concerns with the union level authorization because it will not replace national level authorizations, it will be on top of that. So it's not going to be about simplifying, it's going to be adding another layer. And we're going to discuss on satellites later. So I wanted to go back to point 2, to Article 9, the scope of general authorization for a second, because in Amazon we don't miss talented legal persons, but it took months for them, months to assess the impact of the authorization regime for us general authorization regime for us. And still, we don't have clarity what it means. We don't know. After 4 months, we don't know. So, for example, each data center, each building has millions of single fibers going from one server to one router. Inside a building, are those in scope of Article 9.2? If yes, why? What is the regulatory problem with those? And when those fibers are connecting to different buildings, again, what is the problem with those? Those are private networks. Second, in some cases, we don't even operate the physical networks. We partner with telecom operators that are operating and managing the physical network for us, but still we might fall in scope because the definition of network include virtual networks, right? So is that the case? Because if yes, given the definition in Article 2 of networks, given the terminology, the wording in Article 9.2, all your mail is not defined, to the public is not defined, there is a very long list of words that are not defined. Then basically it could include in scope any business that is whose main service is provided through a website or an app. When they connect to data centers or to their facilities via a virtual or a physical network. This is what I say when the scope is not bounded, is very large. And moreover, it's not clear whether the requirements that apply to public networks are going to also apply to private networks. And we don't know, are we going to be subject to requirements like interconnect obligations, access obligations that do not make sense for private networks, made sense for public networks 20, 30 years ago. And I'm gonna finish with an example on why this could be counterproductive for the same goals of resilience and security. And I'll go back to March and February 2024, when multiple subsea cables were hit on the Red Sea. That was February 2024. In March 2024, there was a landslide in West Africa, cutting out another corridor. So basically, subsea cables are deployed in corridor. When there is an incident, it's not an incident on one subsea cable. The entire corridor is going down. We managed to keep connectivity for our customers in our South Africa region, but that's only because we invest in alternative routes, resilient routes, multiple landing points, routes that are far from corridors. Right? If a corridor is here, you want to have your subsea cables, your additional subsea cables in another route. So these are assets that require a 25 to 40-year investment. And my job is, from a regulatory perspective, to explain to the business unit why there is a clear case for investing. So I see three issues with the current version of the DNA, with the DNA proposal. A regulatory certainty, there is no regulatory certainty. Simplification and regulatory stability, and three, lower compliance costs. So these are really three areas where there is work to do.
Great, thank you very much. Well, I'm afraid we have half an hour left. Three topics that I wanted to discuss. A lot more that you mentioned, but I'm afraid we won't have time to unpack all of those today. But if we jump into copper switch off, right? The DNA proposes a much more concrete copper switch off framework compared to what we have now in the EECC. It introduces, transition plans and 95% fiber coverage conditions before switch off in a given area, but eventually also at a later stage, for now from 2035, switch off without this coverage condition. So the main question really is, how do you create a strong investment signal for fiber that Francesco talked about, while still preserving proportionality, competition, consumer safeguards, and flexibility for areas where fiber deployment is difficult or lagging because of physical realities. Michał, if I can start with you again, and we heard Stephen comparing the top-down mandatory solution to Eastern Europe socialist approaches.
History.
Yes, historic approaches, socialist approaches. And we've also seen, also commissioned by Connect Europe, a legal opinion by a former European Court of Justice judge, which argues that the mandatory model may raise issues of proportionality, property rights, and freedom to conduct a business. Does the Parliament share those concerns? Could they be addressed during the co-legislative procedure by amending the safeguards, adjusting these coverage requirements, adjusting conditions for exceptions or timing? Or do these concerns actually raise a more fundamental question whether such an EU-level mandatory switch-off model is the right approach?
And I think the last sentence that you used is the most crucial here, because it's a fundamental question whether this is really what we are expecting from Brussels, from the Commission, that they are introducing a ban, or they are trying to force the market players and the market recipients, the customers, to switch from one technology to another. And that's the issue, with all due respect, and I have no doubts about the need to make a transition to fiber pretty quickly. It's just that, at the end of the day, it's about the clients, it's about the consumers. And I'm not so sure whether the Commission really did make a survey before publishing the DNA proposal, whether the vast majority of the clients of the consumers, but businesses as well, are really that happy to jump from one technology to another, whether they really need it, whether they are not entirely happy or satisfied with the level of services they are acquiring right now. Also, the copper obviously has many names, many speeds, different variants. And, that was my first reaction when I saw this idea, that I do understand what the Commission is saying. And the Commission simply says that without this element to push the market players, the transition to fiber would be very slow. So they had to react. They were trying to push in this way. But again, I have doubts, and I'm afraid that these doubts might be shared by the Parliament. I don't know what the Parliament would decide here. It's just that, my liberal heart is a bit, broken when I see that the Commission is trying to force independent market players to select a very specific technology right now, immediately, where the situation of different member states is very different. My country is also pretty advanced in the transition to fiber. So it's not a big case. It's not the big issue for Poland. But I have to respect that some member states are in a very different position. So we are still thinking and considering, all options that are available here. Yes, I did read this opinion piece. I'm not a lawyer, but I do understand these issues, and these are the serious challenges. And they were raised by this report. They might be raised by other also members of the European Parliament, because there are the serious issues related to the fundamentals of European Union, how we operate in this sector or another. So we are treating this very seriously.
Thank you very much. And Stephen, I guess you would agree with Michał here. And Connect Europe, of course, is very openly critical of this top-down copper switch-off mandates. So what would you say is a credible market-driven alternative to the Commission's proposal? And how do you respond to the argument that without a binding switch-off date, legacy copper revenues may continue to slow down fiber take-up and investment?
Yeah, thank you, Matej. I was listening to what Francesco was saying, listing all the advantages of fiber, and I don't think I can agree more. And I think a lot of our Connect Europe members have been massively investing in fiber and try to roll out fiber as far as possible. And it has been already been very successful in a lot of markets without the need for a kind of, as I said, a kind of plan economy diktat of what should exactly be happening in an industry. There's a legal incompatibility, I think, which should be really looked at seriously. I will not develop it further, not to turning this into a legal debate. I think where the focus should really be is focusing on where the business case to further roll out fiber has its challenges and how we can, with policy changes, help making the business case work with targeted interventions. I think the Belgian regulator, and Michał is sitting here in front of it, has done already a lot of efforts in order to also plead for the case of fiber, helping to stimulate and working with local communities in order to make sure that permit granting becomes easier and things like that. I think that's where the focus should be, really the things that further enable the deployment of fiber. And then we have the special project in Belgium where we also try to see how we can unite parties to jointly together roll out fiber. So that's, I think, the market-driven answers in cooperation with authorities to see where are the roadblocks and how can we lift it, but not a kind of diktat saying that it should be like that. Most of the times, investors, you scare them away with this kind of top-down decisions, and that's, I think, in the current circumstances, the last thing we should do. And Francesco, we rely a lot on your members, suppliers, to make sure that the fiber investments are happy. I don't think they want to be regulated neither, because we could get into a debate that the supply side should also be regulated and things like that. That's not the way I think we should go to. Let's identify the difficulties and then see how we can address it. And I think it will require a bit of a local focus. There I agree that not every market in Europe is the same. I think we really need to be practical and see what is hindering in certain markets, and there to see how we can solve. It's also, we're talking a lot about copper, but there are also other more legacy technologies. So if you switch off copper, are we then also going to talk about switch off coax and et cetera, et cetera? You get into a very complex, unwanted debate, which basically will say a lot of investors, oh, what is happening now in Europe? It's again not going the right direction. Let's not go there. You can have similarities also. A lot of people are convinced that you should eat brown bread instead of white bread. Should we dictate that by a certain year in Europe, no Europeans are eating white bread anymore? No, let's stimulate people, try to eat more brown bread. That's good for health. But if you really want to have a slice of white bread, okay. So if you really want to have, to a certain extent, also still a copper solution, okay. Let's let the market work. But I can reassure you that all the members of Connect Europe do their utmost foremost effort to deploy fiber as much as they can, including Michał here in Belgium. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. So, Francesco, copper is white bread, fiber is brown bread. but to be serious, FTTH Council, you do support copper switch-off framework as an investment signal, as you said. So what do you think should the DNA preserve in the legislative process? The deadlines, the 95% fiber threshold, the focus on FTTH and not alternative technologies?
But the main point is the one on which I finished my previous intervention, and it's the clear signal to investors that when you invest, your network will be used. Because this is what is necessary to bring money in the market. Then I understand the observations on what to do in areas which will not be covered by fiber. So at a certain point, you get to 2035 in the Commission proposal, and you may have areas where fiber has not been deployed. Now, as I understand the Commission proposal, each member state can even maintain copper in those areas if there are no alternatives. If I didn't understand properly, I think we can work on that in order to guarantee that where there is no case for investment, no alternative, etc., we can find a reasonable solution. But anyway, I think that the most important part is providing investors with certainty. This is the most important. Then, on timing, I think we could even accelerate the first part. So when you begin the copper switch off in areas which are already covered by fiber, we don't need to begin in 2030. We can begin at least 1 year sooner because national regulatory authorities already have a clear map through Article 22 geographical survey of how the country is covered, each street address, etc. So where you reach the sustainability condition and where you do not. So you can anticipate, and we can discuss more on how to finish the process, which is clearly an issue. But I think that we should give all citizens the same opportunity as soon as possible. So it is clear that you may have areas which will be a little bit behind, but at a certain point you have to find a solution to complete the migration. Yeah. On sustainability condition, the 95%, well, it's, in my view, a good idea to guarantee a sustainability condition. As FTTH Council, we suggest to use as a reference not 95% of all premises, but only the premises where there is an active copper service. So if we are looking now at this area, but half the room has already migrated to fiber, just look at the half where migration has not occurred and see which seats have to be reached by fiber, and if you cover 95% of those seats. It's simpler, it's more effective, it's more related with the objective.
Okay, thank you very much. I see we're starting to be a little bit short on time, so maybe quickly, Alejandra, for you, I read the BEREC opinion on copper switch off, and one of the things that BEREC says that this 95% exception should stay in place even after 2035. So the way I understand this is that you are leaning more towards what Michał and Steven said, towards increased flexibility than towards a very strict date when the switch off should start, also in areas which might not be there with coverage yet.
Well, thank you. As you mentioned, BEREC has issued a report on copper switch off and also different contributions before the DNA appeared. And we are very happy that some of these contributions have been taken on board in the copper switch off, in the DNA copper switch off proposal. Like, for example, the postponing of the data of the deadline. First of all, it was 2030, and it was postponed. And then, of course, the idea of the important role that member states and NRAs will have in the process of transition from copper to switch to fiber. And this is important because national authorities, regulators, member states are the ones who know exactly national circumstances. And that was happened in all our member states. So having said this, we have two key ideas, main ideas in our document. First of all, flexibility. As you mentioned, we aim for more flexibility in the copper switch off, not only because we have knowledge and experience on that, but also because the member states at a different stage, as you mentioned, all of us mentioned, that at a different stage in the process of copper switch off. And this has to be taken into account. For example, Spain, has been said, we finished with the copper switch off procedure last year, 2025. Other member states will finish by 2030. And the remaining will have a plan. Will have a plan to finish and to the transition from copper to fiber. So the idea is not to add layers of complexity, to have more flexibility, to have the possibility to adapt the transition from copper to switch off in order to take into account all the national circumstances. And this is what we did in Spain. We did in Spain, as was mentioned, Telefónica had the rules that were established by the regulator, the Spanish regulator. We elaborate the procedure, we led the procedure, and in the procedure, if there were some exchanges, local exchanges that were not prepared, we said, okay, you can postpone the copper switch off with the migration then until you have the whole area that has been covered by fiber FTTH. So the idea is flexibility. And another idea is what you mentioned about covering all the areas. I mean, there is a mandatory deadline for 2035 for copper switch off and affects to all areas. And the idea is that some areas are not well prepared. Some areas may have exceptions because some areas cannot be achieved by fiber deployment. So in that case, we think within BEREC that we have to establish some exceptions to the copper switch off migration. And that's the case in case that in one area, if it is obliged to have this copper switch off, there will be no fixed network at all. There will be harm for end users, for consumers, for everyone. So we have to have the necessary flexibility for areas to adopt the measures that will be important for operators to achieve the fiber FTTH. And of course, as Mr. Kobosko was said, BEREC is very worried about end users. We are, of course, proposing transparency to end users, transparency for alternative operators to understand where, in what states, in what steps are we whenever we have this process.
Very much. Thank you very much.
It's not working? Okay, it is now. I see we have a burning question from the audience on copper switch off. I hope, please make it short, and whoever it is addressed to, please make the answer short as well, because otherwise we will run out of time. We need one? Yes. We need one mic from here?
Well, sorry, good question.
Yes, the waving there at the...
Yeah, in the back.
Christian Borger from Akamai Technologies. My question is not about white bread or black bread. It's actually a question for Mr. Kobosko, and thank you for highlighting the need for simplification. We are one of the hundreds and hundreds of companies that Federico was talking about that suddenly we realize for the first time ever that we are sort of a telecom type service. Even though we don't do spectrum, we don't run all these cables across countries, we don't have spectrum, we don't even serve end users in Europe. And yet we are one of the many, many small players that suddenly find itself to be a telecom type service. Is this something that European Parliament would look at and say maybe the DNA proposal from the Commission, maybe it's a little bit too broad, maybe it impacts too many players that were not intended to be impacted? Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's actually one of the key questions that we are having when we are reading and analyzing DNA proposal, that it might be that it goes too far and it's trying to address too many issues and too many sides. So I won't give you a clear answer at this stage, as I said, pretty early stage on our side, but we are analyzing this also very, very deeply.
Sorry, it's one mic.
Okay, if there's no more burning questions at this stage, let's jump into satellites really quickly. The satellite chapter of the DNA is one of the clearest examples of trying to overcome national fragmentation. And because satellite is inherently cross-border, the proposal also moves towards EU-level authorization, both for spectrum, for satellite spectrum, but also for services. But as I mentioned before, there are open questions around enforcement, interference, security, spectrum sharing, but also level playing field with terrestrial networks. And Federico, let me start with you, because Amazon Leo is becoming a significant satellite player. You mentioned it briefly in your opening statement, but looking at EU-level satellite authorization, is this a move into the right direction? Does this give the proposal would give satellite players more predictability, better chance to scale? Or do you see a risk, as you said, because of this dual layer of enforcement when you European level, but then national on top of it?
Yeah, thank you, Matej. First, Amazon Leo has 330 satellites now up in orbit. There are hundreds ready to launch. We have already 18 launches in total scheduled with Ariane, and we're very proud that the first 3 went very well. So that's the largest commercial commitment with Ariane. Speeds are going to range between 100 megabit per second, small terminal to the big enterprise terminal, 1 gigabit per second. So it's a real alternative to fiber in hard to reach areas. Now, to your question, there are 2 aspects, governance and harmonization. On governance, now the union level authorization. In practice, we handle with member states for matters related to authorization. One is about spectrum, one is about lawful intercept data retention. It could be an interference with a satellite earth station, with a radar, with maritime apparatus, with aeronautical apparatus, and all of these issues are different in different member states. That's why in practice, we believe this is not going to work because we have to go back again to member states to sort out all these authorization issues. What we think is going to work is harmonization. So striving to have simplified, as similar as possible conditions in different member states, so that authorization can be made predictable and simplified. However, our concern is that many of the proposals in the DNA are coming in future implementing acts. So it's very difficult then to assess whether they are really helpful for simplification or not. And that is not only a challenge we have with satellites. In general, we believe there are too many implementing acts in DNA. So in summary, we support harmonization, but we don't think that a centralized governance is the right answer for simplification. There was a second question that you asked about leveling playing field of satellites. Do you want me to answer this now or later?
Well, I might ask first Stephen what he thinks about that, actually. From the operator side, do you think this proposed EU-level satellite authorization as a welcome simplification for a complementary technology, or as a risk of creating a different regulatory track for satellite providers that may, in the end, increasingly compete with terrestrial networks, both with mobile and fixed operators, especially in the D2D context?
Well, as part of a broader discussion, I think, on how we manage spectrum in Europe, and I think, as I said in my introduction, definitely also for the spectrum at the terrestrial level, I think what the Commission has tabled, because we're being a bit critical on the Commission, I think what they have tabled on longer-term licenses for spectrum, more stability and more affordability, so let's use it to as a kind of taxation. That's definitely good. On satellite, I think satellite is going to become a complementary of the terrestrial services. That's what it is. I think we need to make sure that European operators have a good choice there and can integrate it in the services. I think we need to be mindful about the level playing field between satellite and terrestrial. If I, Michał, look at Belgium, every pylon in Belgium receives taxation. Are we also gonna? We try to avoid it, but are we also then have taxation of satellites in the future and things like that? So I think we need to see a bit how the level playing field will be on that thing. I think for me, I think also a bit as a European, I think it's good that Europe is taking this matter in its hands. You're referring to the number of satellites you have already in space for an American-based company. I think also there should be European-based initiatives in this domain. It's of strategic importance, and not only speaking for my sector, also my personal conviction. I think we need to have this straight, and I think the efforts that the Commission is doing on that level are something we definitely, and I also personally welcome in these special times. We need European alternatives at that level.
Okay, thank you.
Federico, you want to respond really quickly? level playing field, Europe first.
Quickly, it's important that regulation is solving specific problems and specific problems related to the specific technologies. So satellite is a different technology than terrestrial, and it's subject to some regulations that terrestrial is not subject to. So, for example, orbital resource management, space safety, sustainability requirements, air station rules. Should terrestrial networks be subject to this? So that's a question for you. Probably, as an engineer, say probably not. Right. So it's important really that regulation is tailored to the underlying technologies, and the technologies are different.
Okay, so not same service, same regulation, but same technology, same regulation.
I think we really need to look at from a market user perspective and how he perceives it, and I think it's going to be more blended in, and so it's going to be more comparable services. Anyway, I think my point is really, let's make sure there's a good level playing field in Europe, and that we develop our own services also, and that we have a good way to integrate that in our own mobile service. In 6G, it will be part of the standard, device to device via satellite.
Thank you very much. So we've heard satellite play, and Amazon Leo is not the only one that is skeptical about the EU-level satellite authorization. Other satellite players share those concerns. RSPG, the Radio Spectrum Policy Group, share those concerns as well. BEREC has not published the satellite opinion yet. Quickly, because we are running out of time. Can you tell us, BEREC shares RSPG and satellite players' concerns? Or do you support EU centralization when it comes to satellite?
Don't worry, the document will come soon. Of course, we have published already 16 documents, and now we have only 3 remaining documents, which one of these is the satellite document, where it has been analyzed deeper by us, and so you will have it very soon. I don't think it will be published today or tomorrow. So the idea from BEREC perspective is that we welcome the harmonization. Harmonization is needed for satellite operators to strengthen their role, to have more resilience, and of course, for Europe's competitiveness. But from BEREC's perspective, harmonization is not excessive centralization. That means that we kind of have a more balanced approach in this case. And the reason is that spectrum is not only an economic resource. Spectrum affects also defense, scientific research, and a lot of cybersecurity issues. So that has to be taken into account when you regulate satellite services and satellite authorization. Also, member states maintain their competences on interference, defense, also local circumstances. So national circumstances have to be taken into account. And from a practical view as well, when a satellite authorization is given, has to be in cooperation with national authorities, international authorities, and also with ITU processes. So everything has to be taken into account. So what is the position of BEREC in this paper that you will soon, you can read it very soon. The position of BEREC is to have a balanced approach. We would welcome a set of minimal conditions at EU level for satellite operators, so they gain empowerment, they gain competitiveness, and they have strength within Europe. But at the same time, from BEREC perspective, member states should maintain their competences on issuing the authorization on license authorization of satellite in order to address national circumstances.
Okay. So, second thoughts about centralization again, and really quickly, Michał, if I may, because we're really running out of time, and I want to touch upon voluntary conciliation. Where is Parliament leaning? Yes, centralization, or no national authorization? going forward.
Regarding satellites.
Yes,
Well,
satellite, yeah.
Sorry, it's just that, our panel discussion also showing you that the vast majority of our problems and challenges are the terrestrial ones. So we didn't even have a chance to discuss satellites deeply, but very briefly, yes, I do believe that this decision, this direction taken by the Commission is the one that we should be seriously considering, because satellites go beyond borders, obviously. And this part of the discussion on the DNA is where I am subscribing to the to the vision of the Commission. I believe that might be a right move. However, I believe that we should see the layer of satellite spectrum as a way to improve the interlink between terrestrial networks, basically. But again, yes, we do believe, and I could subscribe to the vision of the Commission, which in other parts of the DNA, I'm afraid, is not where we are today.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're basically out of time, but I would allow myself to steal a couple of minutes of your coffee break to quickly do a lightning round on voluntary conciliation. But really, let's try to limit our responses to like a minute or something. So I would start with you, Michał, again. As a DNA rapporteur, do you agree with the IMCO rapporteur that voluntary conciliation should become mandatory, or do you think that the Commission's softer approach gets the balance right?
Well, first, let me say that the current Commission proposal is not good. It's not good because it's really hard to believe that might work in practice. That could be easily implemented, and then many sites would be really interested in using this mechanism. So now the question is which direction we should go. I must say I love my French colleague, Stéphanie Yon-Courtin, from the IMCO committee. I have a lot of respect for her, also for her bravery in going out with the idea of the binding, obligatory dispute setting mechanism. We are still ahead of the discussion also internally in our political group, as she represents the same group as me, the Renew Europe. We will have a deep discussion on that, whether this is a right course. It's just that we are in the position where you look, what was proposed by the Commission is not the good idea. It's not only the best, the good idea that could be easily implemented. So basically, at the end of the day, we might land in a position where we would need to choose whether we want to eliminate the whole mechanism from the DNA proposal, or we are brave enough to go as far as this binding mechanism. I'm not ready to answer this question yet. I just want to add that this is a part of a discussion about the tech sovereignty of Europe. And you have to always remember that tech sovereignty of Europe is about security and resilience, but it's also about giving our European players, companies, a chance. And that's where I feel my responsibility is. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. If I jump to you, Federico, it's a number of stakeholders, not just large digital players like the one that you represent, but also some consumer organizations, open internet advocates, who are expressing concerns that even the proposed voluntary conciliation mechanism could become a sort of a backdoor to network fees, paid prioritization, or regulatory pressure on commercial internet traffic arrangements. From AWS perspective, what's the core objection towards the proposal?
Yeah, look, so in the same way as the large majority of the stakeholders who participated in the debate in the last 4 years, so you have consumer associations, you have open internet advocates, you have industrial associations across multiple sectors. We also see concerns with the proposals of regulating the IP interconnect, and there are two actually. There is not only the ecosystem cooperation, but there is also the extension of scope of Article 9 to CDNs, content delivery networks, which would bring CDNs in scope of interconnect obligations, impacting not only CDNs, but all the tens of thousands of businesses in Europe that are delivering their content through CDNs. That could dramatically change the internet architecture because transit is not going to be an option anymore. Peering will become the de facto only option at a price that is decided by the incumbent telecom operators. But let me just close with two concerns on the way we believe that DNA frame the discussion on ecosystem cooperation that does not reflect reality. It assumes that there is a lack of ecosystem cooperation. It assumes that there is a problem. But actually there are million of organizations in Europe that are peering, not only large telecom operators and large internet companies. Of these million of peering agreements, according to a study by Plum, only 0.001% has led to issues that have been solved with existing law. So that's the first point. The second one is that it seems like traffic is a problem. It seems like we are developing very high-speed networks, but then traffic is a problem. Isn't counterintuitive. So according to the latest Ericsson mobility report, today traffic growth is not exponential, it's 17% on a year-on-year basis in mobile networks. In my opinion, 70% year-on-year is concerning because it's not enough. It's not enough. It means that users are not using innovative services. According to a study by Plum, that account only for 1% of investment in CapEx by incumbent telecom operators. So the narrative, when you look at the numbers, that doesn't fit. So closing, our core objection is that proposals of regulating the IP interconnect either via Article 9 or the voluntary mechanisms, lack an impact assessment. They don't solve a problem that exists, at least looking at, for example, BEREC studies in the last 14 years. An intervention might work well for the incumbent telecom operators. Yes, it would allow them to monetize peering, but it would affect negatively thousands of European organizations and European consumers.
And really, really quickly, Stephen, because we are out of time, from your perspective, would this voluntary model be enough to address the concern that large global digital players and national telecoms operators might not come to the table with equal bargaining power?
Fine. I think I agree with the analysis of Mr. Kobosko. I think if we have a mechanism, it needs to be workable. If not, it's a bit of a waste and adds complexity. I think our position of association is well known. We have stimulated this discussion years ago, so I think we believe in it. It's not about just regulating peering. It's just, I think, about taking care of huge imbalances in power between companies. That is what it is about. If you look at telco companies versus the big tech large companies, that's power balance is huge. And so it's logic that there is a mechanism, if the commercial negotiations fail, that there is an arbitration that can step into. That doesn't dictate the outcome of it. It's still arbitration. So I think it's still a very fair approach to deal with things, and which basically we have been doing with Europe on a lot of other subjects, where we think there is an imbalance in power between players, then there are rules. Apparently for this thing, for geopolitical reasons, we initially thought about it, and then we were scared off by Trump, and they put it away. And not surprised, of course, by the American companies intensively lobbying against it, because it goes against their interest. I don't think it negatively affects consumers, because in the arbitration that should be taken into account, I think, of course. So I think that is a bit fueled by those who are against it. But I think, yes, if it can be established and if it's workable, it's good. If it's going to just be something which leads to nowhere, then better scrap it. I think that the mantra in our discussion should be prune the complexity of the regulatory apple tree. If we want to have it bear fruits, there's a lot of pruning that needs to happen. Let's take out the copper outphasing. Let's take out this additional wholesale product layer. And yes, if we introduce this, make sure it's effective, and regulatory authorities can indeed, in an effective way, do the arbitration for things that the market cannot resolve. That's our position.
Thank you very much. Do we have like a super short question from? No, we're out of time. Philippe is saying no. So thank you very much. Thank you very much. I feel that there's a lot more to unpack here, but unfortunately we're out of time. So it's coffee time, and we continue with AI afterwards. Thank you.